Hey everybody, before we get started, I just want to remind you this episode is brought to you by our patrons like Ica Comics, Qua, Jeremy Vasquez, Kylie Denton, Nestor Flores, Sodasan0424, and VideoGamer75. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early and lots of other goodies, and it really help us out. Thanks for your support, everybody. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll a 5-star, and you probably want to roll this one. Yeah, it's back, all the classic hallmarks, limited servants, high power, waifus, all the stuff you like. Anyway, so this is Wanted. This is a show we do about new and sometimes old 5-stars, usually of the limited variety. The story locks are pretty up there in terms of important on letting you know if you want to roll or not. But basically, in case this is your first show, we break this down into 4 segments. Usually we talk about a character's real-life history or fictional history. But, you know, the real-life ethos or mythos around them. We talk about their capital L lore in Fate and any other story stuff they may be in. We will talk about their mechanics, and then we'll talk about their rarity. Not their star rarity, but how frequently their rate-ups are. And people have been jonesing for this one for a while. I expect if some players are newer, they might not even realize that today's subject, Brynhilde, actually had a rate-up before. She actually had a trial quest. It was with one of the millions of downloads campaigns. I can't remember which one it actually was in NA, because we're slightly off. Anyway, it was a while ago. It was early last year, so it was over a year ago. So it's kind of a big deal that she's coming back, even if she's on a kind of hitch in her post with Neurofest. But, hey, she's coming back, so we're going to talk about the SSR Lancer Brunhilde today. So this is an interesting one. Real-life fiction-wise, we're just going to jump into it, by the way. Real-life wise, Brynhilde, also Brynhildr, Brunhilde, Brunhilde, there's a lot of different transliterations of this, is a figure from various Germanic myths, but the Scandinavian and Germanic traditions. Technically, we are talking more about the Scandinavian version today because Fate is weird, and so they're talking about different things. So technically, Siegfried, who appears as the summonable saber in Apocrypha, etc., is technically from a different mythos than this Brunhilde. So they're kind of not necessarily the same stories, but there's the same archetypal character. So in his story, there's I think the differentiation is like Brunhilde. It's whatever the version in Nibelungenlied is. Anyway, so there's an actual fork. Those two characters exist separately, despite the fact that those are very clearly the same mythologies, and thus may never have existed at all. Collective unconsciousness and time shenanigans are weird like that. It's very weird. Okay? Yeah, it's Brunhilde in the Wagner opera, that's right. Okay. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes. We're not going to talk about that version. We're going to talk about the Scandinavian version, because that's the one with Sigurd. Not Siegfried, but Sigurd, who will get his own Wanted someday. Don't you worry. He's a limited single-target saber, so right up there on the list. But yes, it's they're similar but slightly different myths. This is the Scandinavianish version, which exists in the Volsung Saga and also in the Prose and Poetic Edda. The shortest version of her story is basically that Sigurd finds a woman called Brynhilde. She's sleeping on a mountain surrounded by a wall of flame. You have to ride through the flame to wake her up, or she'll just marry the man with no fear who can choose to ride through the flames. That man is Sigurd, but depending on the version, he's either he does it just 'cause, or he's doing it because Gunnar, who ends up being his brother-in-law, is like, yo, dude, I want to marry that chick sleeping in the fire. And kind of back and forth and stuff. There's some shenanigans. In the Prose Edda, for instance, and some of the Poetics, there's the whole shape-changing, pretending and stuff. There's little aspects here and there of other things like rings, exchange, etc. The version in Fate, though, I think is drawn mostly from the Volsung Saga, which has this whole, like, tragic up and down kind of aspect to it. It's a lot more formal, it's a lot more expanded. In all of these mythologies, Brynhilde is the sister of Atli, which is Attila the Hun. So yes, technically Altera and Brunhilde are considered related, and Brunhilde actually shows up in some of Altera's interludes. We'll talk about how that works mechanically in Fate in the lore section, but that's kind of confusing, so we'll try and talk a little bit to that. But yeah, that's pretty typical. She's raised as a shield maiden and a Valkyrie. She angers Odin by intervening in a fight that Odin wanted the other guy to win, so as punishment, he sticks her with a sleep thorn and declares she's going to marry. But she says she won't marry a man until she finds a guy who knows no fear. So then he places her in the mountain and surrounds her with a wall of shields in the Volsung Saga, interestingly. Though I think the firewall thing is cooler. In this version, Sigurd comes to her, presumably after his slaying of the dragon. That's usually pretty important. He awakens her. She gives him wisdom and foreboding prophecies and stuff. Brynhild's all about that foreboding prophecy. Then they decide to marry. Then they split up. They return. He meets her again. Blah, blah, blah. They talk. Gonna go for a marry. But then Gudrun, who does end up actually marrying Sigurd, has a foreboding dream and has Brynhild interpret it. She tells her it's going to be some misfortune and stuff. Then Gunnar decides he's going to woo Brynhild, and Sigurd has been made to forget her by a potion. Blah, 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 tragedy. And then the Wall of Flames comes back, so Gunnar isn't able to do it. Sigurd takes his shape. Blah, blah, blah. There's a very important note here about placing a sword in between them to block the marriage bed. And then that all comes crashing down when later Brynhild and Gudrun are bathing in a river, which is actually the bed image I wanted to use, but it's too saucy. Can't do it YouTube. Look it up on your own. But they discuss. Brynhild is kind of snotty and is like, I don't want the water from your hair to touch mine because my husband is more important. And then Gudrun lets it slip, and so they fight, and then Brynhild gets very mad and conspires to kill him. Basically, the whole thing. And then that sets off the blah, blah, blah. So Sigurd is killed, and then she's very sad, and then she commits suicide and burns in the same pyre as him. She's also syncretized with another Valkyrie in certain poems called Sigurdfa? Sigurdfa? I don't know how to... It should be an E? I? I don't know. There's a weird squiggle on that I. It's in one of the poetic forms, where also this syncretized to her, and she teaches Sigurd wisdom and runes in this version, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much the shortest telling of her original story. It's a classic kind of tragic love. You know, she brings the downfall of Sigurd because she quarrels with his wife, and then there's the whole shenanigans about the relationship thing. It's kind of, you know, tragic and so on. So in Fate, it's important to know that some of the tragedy elements are played up, and some other stuff is kind of like worked into the mythos, and we'll kind of talk about all that right now. So before we get into some of the more Fate-y discussions about Brynhild, it's important to note where she comes from. So Brynhild is a character first appearing in Fate Prototype Fragments. That's basically the 0 to the Prototype universe, the original version of Fate where King Arthur was a dude and the main player was a lady. And then Takeuchi convinced Nasu to make it an Aeroja instead, with ladies and nudity, thus changing our lives forever through waifuism. And there, you know, she has this whole kind of back and forth thing with her tragedy and Arthur and blah, blah, blah. She also does appear in Fate Grand Order. She did have a trial quest, which unfortunately you can't repeat. At least I'm pretty sure you can. I don't know. Sometimes they bring some of that stuff back, sometimes not. But she had a trial quest you could have undertaken, which would have kind of explained her whole character. And for a lot of people, that made or break her character, because on the one hand, oh, she's so tragic and nice and stuff. On the other hand, oh man, she really fuckles your brain. She is also going to be a major character in one of the upcoming Lost Belts next year, for obvious reasons. That's Lost Belt 2, Katadamorang. So that's a whole big deal where she'll show up again as a character, and we'll meet some other people from her backstory. And that'll be super interesting to read, so that's upcoming. And she also, like I said, features a couple of places here and there, like interludes and so on, because she's a kind of important character. So it's a little weird. In a lot of the classic legends, obviously this was probably added later, but she's the younger sister of Attila, King Atli, But also, they try to deify her originally, which is, I can't find a lot of source for that. In fact, the most origin form of Brynhilde, I should have mentioned this in the earlier real life half, but I'll mention it now because it's important, is that she may have her origins in an actual historic princess of the Visigoths who was Brunhilde of Austrasia. Okay, so there's a person in history sharing her name that may be the origin for this kind of myth that rose up. But in general, the as far as I can tell, skimming some of these, because it's a little hard for me to, read some of these old-ass poems in Norse and whatnot, but we'll see this when we flip to mechanics. She's got Divinity E, and it was supposed to be much higher because she was originally a goddess of war, but then as part of the whole Odin stuck her with the thorn and sealed her away, it reduced her divinity. I can't really find a lot of source in that. She's mostly just a queen. And a Valkyrie, I don't know if we're saying that because she was a Valkyrie, she was more divine E, and the Valkyries are daughters of... I don't know. Like, it's an interesting juxtaposition. I'm not quite sure where the source is, because unfortunately a lot of her, deeper backstory stuff would be in Prototype Fragments, but that's a light novel series, which means, of course, it hasn't been officially translated in English, so some of this stuff, it's a little hard to track. But that's an important thing. I think the way this is solved is eventually we explain what Altera's backstory is, and in Extella, it's explained that Altera is based on the White Titan Safar, which is a whole thing, and then when she was on her earthly form as Attila, that's kind of like her mini or backup form, a lot of the power of the White Titan, but not all of it, not all the size. And it's explained later through the actual appearance of the characters of the Valkyries that Odin, as the chief god of the Norse pantheon, based the Valkyries on Safar, which is why they have the kind of head wings thing. Safar is really more rabbit-like, but she also has antenna. So it's kind of a weird thematic play aspect. And obviously, if Brynhildr is a Valkyrie and considered senior among the Valkyries, she must also, in a sense, be based on the White Titan, so thus she is the younger sister of King Atli. It's really weird and convoluted, but, there's some stuff. Also, for extra fun facts, in the end of the Nibelungenlied, sorry, it takes me a second to make that name string together in my mind, or the Ring of Nibelungen, Siegfried's wife, Kriemhild, marries King Atli, and then burns lots of people. It's very interesting. There's some weird stuff going on there. But this isn't about Altera, this is about Bryn. So, in addition to that, there's also an effort, I believe, from what I've read, that makes it less of, what you would call it, a indirect tragedy, where, they kind of go back and forth, and, she finally is like, well, you've betrayed me, I can't be consoled. Gunnar, you gotta kill that guy. And then he does, kind of thing. It's more directly that she actually physically kills Sigurd herself, and then kills a lot of his family, and then, herself. And this love is really, big, but also the betrayal is big. In some versions of some poems, she, challenges the goddess of the underworld, Hel, to, make sure that she can be together with Sigurd in the afterlife kind of stuff. So it's kind of a big deal, but it very much, I think, plays up the back and forth, right? It's a lot more, it's even more tragic than a normal tragedy. She has to, stab Sigurd herself and then stab herself, kind of thing, and really plays up a lot of her aspect of betraying, being betrayed, etc. But yeah, that's basically her lore and stuff. So let's move into the mechanics. Alright, so mechanically, Bryn is a 5-star Lancer. She has the exact same HP value as Skahawk and a slightly higher attack value. This puts her at 2nd place in terms of attack. A decent pace, about 500 points under Karna, who is the highest attack right now, Lancer. Though obviously with that attack level, you can be sure that there are quite a few other 5-star Lancers who are above her in HP value. Though, while some of them, the difference is quite significant, the overall level, her HP is not too bad. So, you can see the pretty standard stuff in stats. Lancers have fairly median star absorption. Her star generation is okay, though. It's also kind of... Well, actually, I don't know. This is something I always forget, is to double-check the exact difference. That number is relatively in the middle compared to some others, but that can still be kind of high, considering... but it's not as good as Assassins, but still. Decent star generation. Obviously, as expecting a Year 1 servant. She only has 1 arts card, so her NP generation is through the roof, because she's only got 2 hits on it. Yeah, card balance and NP gen. But she does have 2 quick cards with decent hit counts. So, a little bit better than you'd like. I mean, she doesn't have the Skahak problem where her high hit counts are all in her buster cards. No, those are only 1 hit. But still, with those generation stats, and those hit counts, your NP gen is still going to be okay only. But you do have a pretty decent assemblage of stats there. And then, of course, there's her Noble Phantasm. This is the pretty key one. Significant single target damage. It's a buster. Increases all allies' critical star drop rate for 3 turns by a pretty decent amount. This obviously includes herself. Deals extra damage against those with the Loved One trait, or sometimes called Brynhild's Beloved. So, I'm gonna be honest, this is a weird one. Her, in lore, we can mention this. I could have mentioned it earlier, but now it makes sense to talk about it in RMP. In lore, the way Brynhildr Romantia works is the spear is bigger and heavier the more she loves the person, and the person she loves the most is Sigurd, okay? But she can also feel affection towards people who have traits that are similar to Sigurd, and the game's not really clear on what those are. So obviously Sigurd and Siegfried count, though they're sabers, so that's not necessarily the best use of her time. But otherwise, I think it mostly has to do with characters with certain amounts of a pure-hearted, heroic character, a noble character, possibly a self-sacrificing character, maybe leadership qualities. But anyway, it's really freaking weird, okay? Like, some coups are on there, but not all coups. The saber version of Gilles is on there, and the caster version of Gil is on, but their original versions aren't. Arthur is on there, but strangely enough, MHXX is also on there. It's really weird. You have to look up the list. In general, though, it's very sketchy. There's only a small handful of archers which count, though some of them can be big hitters. Emmy is on there. He's pretty popular. Tesla and future Napoleon are on there, so they could be a thing. But yeah, it's kind of all over the place and kind of weird. I do know that some people have, posited that because her attack is higher and she can get some more multipliers on there, that her NP damage can sometimes outscale Skahak, though Skahak really does have one of the highest overall modifiers there. But technically, I should point out her trait damage is... Bryn's trait damage is higher. The highest you can get with Godslayer is 100% attack plus. The bonus damage on Brynhildr Romantia is minimum 150. So you will get a bigger slice of the trait damage, it's just her trait damage is a lot more schizophrenic. Divine is a much easier to understand and larger pool than Loved One. But still, solid single target damage. Buster is a very popular damage archetype. Now in the world of break gauges, it's a little sketchier to do burst damage like that, but still, it can hit pretty strongly, and it does do a team buff. Also, I should note, it's not in this version, because I think it's just a straight NP interlude, but she does have a rank up for her Noble Phantasm. It just increases the base damage, and it ups the critical drop rate from 30% to 50%. Not a big change, unlike one of her skills, which is also on this list. And actually, I show the post-upgrade version, because it alters what the skill does a little bit. Still, very decent damage. So her first skill is Mana Burst Flame. This is a pretty common variant of Mana Burst. This one is geared more towards NP damage. You only get half the normal Buster increase for one turn, 25%, as opposed to, say, the usual, which is something like 50%. Or if you're Lancer Alter 55%. But it does also give her specifically 15% NP damage on that, which I believe the way the math works makes it slightly better because they multiply instead of stack. So, for instance, the effectiveness on Buster Plus would be, times it by 1.25 and then times it by 1.15. I think that's how the math works. I'm sketchy on that. Okay, guys, I'm not good at math. But still, it means that her NP gain is her NP damage is a little bit higher enhanced, but the Buster follow-ups will be a little bit less enhanced if you do actually get that NP Buster chain. Still, 5-turn cooldown, very decent effectiveness. Her second skill is her Primordial Rune. Everybody loves runes. Bryn's all about them runes. She taught Sigurd some runes. But this is a defensive rune. It reduces one enemy's critical rate for 3 turns by up to 50%, which is pretty decent down. For 3 turns especially, that can really help you manage some enemies who like to crit a lot. And then it also reduces their NP strength for 1 turn by up to 30%. Depending on who you're facing, that can be a decent reduction, especially if you stack it with other defenses. But still, fairly good at reducing down enemy chances. And it's not technically her only defensive ability. So, her third skill, Hero's Assistant, because I guess the original Japanese was something like, Hero's Bridesmaid or something. Is kind of weird. But Hero's Assistant is another 5-turn cooldown. This increases the target's Star Gather by 300 to 600. And so it's... Before the upgrade, it's pretty normal. That won't necessarily help stuff like Berserkers, but it will help more medium-level Star Absorb characters at least beat out their own class and some others of similar weight. But it won't necessarily take you up to the next tier. And it also comes with a 3k heal, which, every 5 turns, that's pretty decent. But after her Interlude 2, it gets better. So the heal stays the same, but the absorption increases to 1,000 to 3,000%. That's much more like, say, Lancelot or Raiko's Self-Star Absorb, only it's targetable. And also it increases that ally's crit damage for 3 turns by 20 to 40%. So you get that much bigger absorption over those 3 turns now, and then they also get up to a 40% boost on criticals for those 3 turns. Turns it into a lot better of an assistant skill, considering that her NP is buffing star drop rate. And she is a Lancer, so she's got decent star gen herself and 2 quick cards. And as you can see in her passive, she has a very good writing, so those 2 quick cards are going to be pretty good. I wouldn't say Bryn is an ideal star generator, but she can act as kind of a pivot in your team, a third man to be like, okay, I want you to get all these stars now and crit better and also heal so you don't die. I will buff the whole team's star generation. I can do okay star generation on my own, or I can enhance another character who is a primary star generator. So her kit is a little mixed, but it means that she's not necessarily super focused on one role, but because her trait damage is on her NP, and she still does have that steroid, you will still hit pretty hard when you fire her NP, and that also gives a team buff. She can reduce down enemy abilities and heal allies, so she's got a little bit of defensive potential. It's not quite the, a laser level spike damage you might get out of some other single target SSRs, but still fairly decent. So to wrap up her passive skills, because we talked about writing already, she does have magic resistance B, so she's fairly resistant to debuffs, and then she also has Divinity E, which we mentioned before. So it's a pretty low rank, but it does stack slightly higher on her passive damage. All in all, Bryn's not a terrible Lancer if you don't have a Skahawk yet. If you've not been blessed, she's a pretty decent pull as well. Like I said, her trait damage is a little finicky. You're going to want to look up whether it applies. But she does have some decent self-steroid. Arguably, you can just burn Hero's Assistant on yourself. So, to act as a secondary defensive ability and heal her, and also increase her star absorption and crit, which isn't already... It's not already the worst, being a Lancer. And she does have a couple of buster cards if you want to try and do some chains. I should note that Hero's Assistant C++, love those pluses. That's in the future still, that's only in Japan, but it is coming that her interlude will include that upgrade. We like to give you, long-term stuff. A lot of people are looking forward with their clairvoyance, so it's a good idea to actually discuss how good servants will be in the future. People's opinions of Dante's shot way up when Skadi came out. Technically, that should be like Scathi, but we'll talk about that when I do a one on her in 2 years. So, Bryn, I think, at worst, suffers from a little bit of Jack-of-all-trades syndrome. You'll notice she's got support, defensive, and also damage-dealing abilities, But, as we like to say on Let's Talk FGO, no servant exists in a vacuum. Like, there are some servants who can truly be solo, but I would argue that Bryn is not one of them, nor is she intended to be. So remember that she's just one person on a team of at minimum 3. So you could bring in some stuff. If I was going to talk about team build, I would either want to pair her with a character who wants that star absorb she can bring, wants those stars and those crits. Sabers like Siegfried and Sigurd are a good idea. They actually synergize really well. Or you'll want to pair her pretty typically with crit and Buster. So Merlin, obviously, that gives you all the defenses you need. That gives her big buffs to damage and crit. Buster, crit, etc. Attack. Not that she needs them, but that's a pretty monstrous buff up there. Also pair her with star generators of any type, and otherwise teams who want to increase their crit stars, and then you can use her to Buster or quick crit. If she's supporting, like I said, that's mostly just characters who want stars. They want the stars and they want to crit with them. CEs, well, that's kind of variable. I would assume you probably want to lend towards just damage. So something that gives her, Buster increase, NP increase, raw attack increase is good. Depending on who else is in your team, you might want to go with some starting NP, because as we said, her NP gen isn't the greatest. It's not going to be the lickiest split. So, you could go for the classic, like a Golden Sumo, though that's only one and done, so I wouldn't know if I would go with 100% with a starting NP. Like, I probably wouldn't K-scope her, unless you're absolutely sure that you're doing that trait damage and you are going to flatten the boss in one hit. Something that buffs her NP gain might be better. Or team her with, batteries. Other than that, like I said, Busters, maybe crits if you're going to Hero's Assistant herself, and so on and so forth. So let's talk about Rarity. Bryn is infamously hard to track. You've already missed one of her banners, I'm terribly sorry to say. That was I'm looking at it now. In NA, that was the 2 million downloads campaign. So that was the one where she premiered, that was her trial quest and all that. We're talking about her because the Nero Festival Redux for 2019 is coming up, where she will share a raid up with Nero Bride. That's also one video you can check out. And then in the future, in the whole 2 years of my forecasting to JP, she's only got one more raid up, and that is the Gatotemerang release campaign, because as I mentioned, she's in that Lost Book number 2. That'll be about a year from now. So she's very rare. Other than like on some GSSRs, you have very limited opportunities, and still she's fairly popular. So yeah, that's basically Bryn. If you didn't get her the first time through the many, many epic Fion spooks, oh, so many spooks, you don't have to worry about that this time. I don't think there's any other Lancers on raid up. It's just 2 Sabers. But she's there, she's coming back, it's going to be hard to get in her. The Gatotemerang release campaign comes at an awkward time. It's like immediately before the anniversary, and also there are other brand new servants coming out on those banners. So now might be as good a time as any. Think about it. Everybody wants to roll on every banner. Why should I rephrase that? Not literally every person wants to roll on every banner, but there's a banner for everyone, basically. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Go ahead and give this a like if you liked it. If you've got any comments, leave them in the comment section down below. Or you can join our Discord. That link's in the description as always. And if you're new here and haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. You can get more Wanteds. You can get our regular FGO podcast, Let's Talk FGO, coming out later this week. And lots of other videos we do. It's real fun. Even if you're already subscribed, consider hitting that bell for notifications so you always know when we post a new video. The alert comes right to you so you know when we post stuff, because sometimes we post stuff weird. And of course, like it says at the front of the show, consider supporting us on Patreon. You could have gotten this episode a whole day early, and lots of other goodies. And like I said, really helps us out. Really helps drive the channel. Alright, well, I'll see you guys in the next Wanted, whatever that one is. I'm not sure. I've got a couple of Wanteds banked up for reruns. So, would that be... Yeah, actually, I don't know. I'd have to look at the schedule. I think the next new servant is Osakabe Hime, but I'm not sure. Just, check out the playlist, look at some stuff. And, if you don't see a brand new Wanted, maybe I've already done a Wanted on that servant. Check it out. Alright. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for your time as always. Bye-bye now. Try not to betray any Valkyries and get stabbed.